So after the Fearless Vampire Killers, I think we'll just proceed through these film selections. We'll see what we can glean from them. The next one on the chronology is, of course, Rosemary's Baby. I feel like probably most people have seen it. We've already sort of summarized, you know what it's about. Not new under the sun, like guy sacrifices his wife. Yeah, exactly. Right, and it's literally the devil. And I mean, I guess in a funny way, like he does, that has like Hammer film aspects of it as well, but it also has this like really intense, like artful psychological realism that ended up being like the potent brew, the witch's brew, if you will, that catapulted Polanski just like to the top.
Yeah, it's very ambiguous and subtle film. You could compare it to The Exorcist, but it's actually even more subtle in a way. Definitely like its cultural impact, like in terms of like the landscape of like horror films or films about the occult, like it has very huge. You can compare it in terms of its impact, but the subtle touch is even more present than in The Exorcist, because it's really ambiguous, like whether there really is a supernatural element in Rosemary's Baby. Like you could say that there isn't, and that it's all like a mix of like
in
drugs, hallucinations, and like a cult existing.
I mean, you could say that. You could say that with a number of his movies, like Repulsion and The Tenant. That basically there's like a little bit of an out, and Polanski, it should be said, has always declared himself to be an atheist.
Not a believer.
Not a believer in the occult. He thinks it's like interesting for symbolic reasons, but and he's like fascinated with evil, but he's just like a flying spaghetti monsterist, basically at the end of the day. At least that's how he presents himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know.
A Swedish journalist asked Polanski about his obsession with the occult. Polanski pounced. "Who told you I'm so interested? Oh, you guys keep asking me the same boring questions, like why I'm so interested in the devil. But there's something about the devil in Knife in the Water. There's something about the devil in The Tenant, or in Tess. We'll talk about Tess, or in Cul-de-sac, or in Bitter Moon. So you are the victims of your own opinions. You put in your computer, I'm doing an interview with Polanski. Polanski, the devil." Yes.
Well, first of all, The Tenant does have it might as well have the devil in it, because it's about like a satanic cult that occupies an apartment building that like psyops this guy into dressing into the dead woman who used to live there previously, and then jump out of the window like she did in the middle of like a huge like satanic occult ritual. So like, I don't know, it's kind of like
about it. Why on earth, like, if he was like, oh, these journalists have just like slandered me as being interested in devil worship or whatever, after I made Rosemary's Baby, when most of my movies don't have to do with that. Why would he then go make The Ninth Gate? Which, like, why would you do that?
Exactly.
Like, so many years later, he definitely had time to form that opinion.
Of course, I sense a touch of hypersensitivity to people bringing that up with him. He seems to really, really get pissed. It's like when Tarantino gets asked about violence in his movies, he has a conniption and basically just freaks out. And it's like, I'm not answering your stupid questions, man. All right? No. Like, fuck you. And it's like, okay. Like, Jesus. Okay. Don't want to talk about that. All right. And it's kind of the same thing where it's like, this is like a running subject matter throughout all of your films. But then when anybody asks you directly about it, you flip out. Just a little bit curious, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. Like, and it's a totally normal thing to ask someone after they've made 2 films about devil worshippers, and a couple things that like are ambiguously in that category. It's not like an outrageous question at all.
It's not. And considering the
like a lot of people don't want to make things about the devil. Some people are kind of scared of the devil. Like they kind of don't want to deal with that stuff. Like still. So it's an eccentric interest to have, so and like elite, also like nefarious secret societies of like elite Luciferian people definitely is also like, it's almost just as common running through. And if you just extrapolate that to like evil, like conspiracies of like evil powerful people who are awful, like Noah Cross in Chinatown,
who's an incestuous pedophile,
Yeah.
you know, in addition to like
Right.
having people murdered and stuff. Then it's like it really runs through all of his films. Like, I mean, I think he has said that he is basically obsessed by the idea of evil, or the, you know, the concept
Yeah.
of evil, and that's like
Well,
really what drives him. So I mean, yeah, it's like, is it that unnatural to point to that,
no,
you know, or to
but,
wonder
yeah.
about that? Also,
Yeah.
like, just to mention, because like this is when he got brought into Hollywood, was for Rosemary's Baby. I guess he was brought over, I think, with the assistance of what was his name, the Polish guy who,
Grotowski.
yeah, he, I think, made the introduction for Roman Polanski to fly out to L.A. and meet with Robert Evans. And Jason Horsley does a pretty good summary of the susness of Robert Evans, who, of course, was like the hotshot producer, godfather. I mean, people literally call him the godfather of Hollywood, who produced The Godfather. There's now going to be like a movie made about the making of The Godfather with Robert Evans as a main character. He was in that Oscar-winning documentary, The Kid Stays in the Picture, from the early 2000s. You know, he was this like preeminent, huge figure. And what most people don't know about him, and I guess came out in more recent years, I guess he was really sponsored to become, I think, the head of Paramount by a guy named Sidney Korshak. And Sidney Korshak was basically one of the most powerful lawyers and fixers for the Chicago outfit, the Chicago mob. And he basically was based out of Los Angeles, and he was kind of like the mob's man in LA, and, you know, had associated with like Capone, Frank Nitti, Sam Giancana, Mo Dalitz, and he was friends with like just about everybody who mattered. And I guess he got Evans, who I think started out as an actor, and then, I don't know, ended up being put in this very powerful position. And then like one of the first things he does to basically kick off his hot streak of new Hollywood films is bring young Roman Polanski over. And he's the one that, according to, you know, the legend or what people say, he was the one that offered him the Rosemary's Baby's book. And I guess Roman Polanski read it in one night and immediately agreed to do it.
Yeah.
There's a sense of, you know, like Robert Evans, that I think Horsley talks about it a lot. I'm pretty sure Dave McGowan talked about it in Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. And other more mainstream people. Like I found a Hollywood Reporter article called "How Robert Evans Really Got His Paramount Job" from 2013, and I guess it was like a super lawyer, Greg Bautzer, knew everybody. And there were other people. There's also an Austrian guy named Bludorn, I believe, who is like a kind of a psycho. And all these people had like mob ties, and perhaps like, you know, via that as well, like underworld government ties. Howard Hughes was like floating around in kind of the same milieu. So, you know, like they bring in Roman Polanski, who like I said before, this is like an underappreciated like aspect that I feel like even the Manson people don't go into. But you have this young star filmmaker from Poland, which is a communist country allied with the Soviet Union, and I cannot believe that the sort of cultural Cold Warriors just sort of didn't notice the immense value of that and the cultural cachet that would provide. Would you say that's a fair assumption?
Yeah.
So the question is like, what, and I think Horsley considers it, he considered it in one sense that basically, you know, he talks about, he quotes from Tom O'Neill's book Chaos, and I think O'Neill had talked to somebody who said that there was a kind of a secret unit, I think it was the SIS, within the LAPD that had sort of ties to the FBI and the CIA, and were kind of this like midnight squad that did a lot of shady activities, and that maybe Polanski, in order to like rise up and... What's that?
Zombie Squad, if you will.
Yeah, basically a zombie squad. And,
yeah.
you know, basically like Polanski's price of admission was for some reason like to do work with them. I mean, he also had some Polish friends around him, like Wojciech Frykowski, who was murdered at Cielo Drive, who was apparently in all kinds of like drug dealing activities and things like that. And nobody ever seems to like, I don't know, either say is Polanski like a KGB asset, or was Polanski a CIA asset? That never seems to get brought up at all. Do you notice that? But like,
yeah, it doesn't really.
Come on, this is
no.
this is kind of like a political football here. Like this young Polish director who comes to America at a Hollywood, like, and then he's making these like fucked up occult movies. I don't know, like that there had to be people like keeping tabs on Roman Polanski, because if there was the slightest whiff that he was like sympathetic to communism, you know what I mean? Like that would be a problem. Obvious. Like everyone had already been blacklisted who was a communist in Hollywood. So you're going to let a Polish guy come over here and, you know, no, you're going to want to have some kind of like loyalty test. You're going to want to screen him. Like I assume like Milos Forman, who was Czech, like came over here and was part of the same exact milieu. Like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you know, just making a little CIA novel. No, it's actually a good movie, but you know what I mean, though? Like, they don't just let people come in like that and but of course, that's what they wanted people to think was happening, right? Like, that was part of the propaganda value, was like, look at how open and freaky and free he can be in America. The evil Stalinist censors in Poland or the USSR would never let him make a movie like this with like sexy women getting like butchered and all these other things. And it's almost like really smartly, I kind of think it's like calculated to tantalize Western audiences, and also like maybe like trigger like socialist countries to be like, no, they're not going to let that film in, you know? Like maybe if he had made like a historical piece, that maybe if he had made Tess first, even if it had some like problematic shit in it, they would have like let it in, because it's like, oh, he was this Polish filmmaker. As long as he's not like actively, you know, trash talking us in public, maybe we'll play along and like, yes, the great Polanski, who's educated in our socialist film schools. But I don't know. Like, I actually don't know even what the Eastern Bloc's like reporting on him was, if they viewed him as kind of like a turncoat, or, you know what I mean? Like, but there had to be, there was like ideological warfare going on around Polanski. There had to be.
Yes, I'd say that's
even
probably true.
Even if it was on like the sub Rosa level. So it's an interesting component to this. I think it might have been in Chaos, where some of the right wing people that were part of like the Zombie Squad, the SIS, and the LAPD might have suspected that Frykowski and Polanski might have had contacts with like the KGB or, you know, foreign communist operatives or something like that. But I don't think he really pursued that because it didn't seem credible. I mean, he did ultimately talk a lot of shit about, he had that famous quote, like, you know, you have to go live in a communist country to see, and then you come and capitalism is amazing. Like, he, you know, he said something like that. So like, he definitely wasn't like, and I don't know, there's really no trace of like a moral drive or like a philosophy beyond like nihilism in any of his movies. So I would say, you know, by that he's almost default like pro-capitalist and pro Satan. Maybe that's a little too far. I mean, also like Chinatown could be seen in a certain way as maybe like, even though it's definitely not like a Marxist parable by any means, it definitely has a kind of critical, like an acerbic, a cynical eye on the American system and on like Los Angeles itself, and like how capitalism operated in a place like California in the 30s. That I feel like kind of like how in the like Chomsky and the Compatible Left essay that Lorenzo was talking about, how Oglesby's Yankee and Cowboy, even though he called himself like a radical centrist, that he was basically like doing like a materialist analysis and a class analysis, so it's still valuable. Same with Mae Brussel. She was like kind of a liberal, but still produced some like really valuable work. I feel like Chinatown, weird, and maybe that's more Robert Towne and his like his ghostwriter, whose name I forget. But at the same time, like for the most part, especially when he was writing the script, it's like highly personal, highly nihilistic. It's paranoid in a way that sometimes Friedkin and De Palma's films are, but it's like more, I don't know, dark and fatalistic, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. You know, there's always like even in the Fear with Vampire Killers, but I guess we didn't mention at the end, you know, they do rescue Sharon Tate, and you know, the vampires basically are implied to win at the end because they rescue Sharon Tate, and like it's too late, you know, she has been vampirized, and she goes in to bite Roman Polanski, while like you know, Jack McGowan Gowron is in the, like, you know, driving the chariot
The
or
carriage.
the sleigh, like, you know, through the snow. Yeah, just obliviously.
And isn't there's a
and it's, like, you know,
voiceover?
naively,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It basically says that this guy, Professor Ambrosius, has, like, naively, you know, he's gone to fight the vampires, but naively he's unleashed the vampires upon the world. And there's often, like, a lot of his movies end where it's like, okay, well, now the world's gonna end. You know, or, like, there's sort of, like, an implication that there's gonna be some kind of apocalypse or something.
Yeah,
And
no, exactly.
I mean, they definitely ended a downbeat no matter what.
Yes.
But
He was
a lot
real.
of them went on literally the biggest downbeat possible.
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.